Welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine. I'm the president, and it's just such a wonderful thing to be in a terrific group like this. It's no wonder that membership in DGT is at an all-time high. Our speaker today is Terry Goddard, and we'll get to Terry in just a moment. He's going to tell us about the Stop Dark Money initiative. But we have a few announcements. So let's start with Christina Early. Tell us what's coming up on our social calendar.
Hi, everybody. We are planning another Drinking Democratically Happy Hour on August the 25th from 4 to 6 p.m. We're still firming up details as to where that's going to be. We had a wonderful group joined us last Wednesday at Monterey Court. We had a great time. Monterey Court was so glad to host us. We signed a lot of petitions, so that was really wonderful. So I hope that everybody will mark your calendar, August the 25th from 4 to 6 p.m. And we will let you know where that's going to be as soon as we firm up the details. So thank you. I hope we see everybody.
And one of the great things about the happy hour is that we had all the petitions, all the initiatives available, and we got over a dozen, maybe 2 dozen signatures collected just at the happy hour. And with that, Sandy Binion, tell us what we've got coming up in terms of programs.
Next week, we have Suzanne Druby, who is a Pima County assessor, who's going to tell us about some new things that the assessor's office has initiated. Following week, we have Richard Fimbrace, who is presently the city council person from Ward 5 and is running for re-election, but he's going to tell us all about what's going on in his ward. Followed by Lucy Messing and hopefully a guest speaker with her, and they're going to be talking about the Invest in Arizona petitions and what we're hoping to accomplish with these petitions and a future vote. And then to round off the month, we have Daniel Hernandez, who is presently a state representative, but is now running for the District 2 congressional seat. We have lots to look forward to.
All right, that's great. Thanks very much. Let's turn now to Kathy Ramage White. Membership's at an all-time high. What do the members know and why are they joining?
Well, they know because this is the place where the smart people come. You know, it's only $20 and it lasts you to the end of this year. But when we were at Drinking Democratically, I had a revelation. I hadn't realized some people don't like to sign up on Act Blue. So if you'd rather not join with Act Blue, just go ahead and write your check to GGT and then mail it to DGT at Post Office Box 41573. If you haven't joined or rejoined because you don't like Act Blue, then just go ahead and send it to our post office box. Glad you all are here with us. If any of you aren't yet a member, come on, let's join up. Stop hesitating and send it to the post office box. Thanks a lot. Oh, and I've already spoken with Terry and he says, yep, he's there with us. He's going to sign up. So we're in good company with our speaker. Thanks, Larry. It's back to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Kathy. Right on. We have an announcement from Lucy Messing. Go ahead, Lucy.
Thank you. But I want to just remind people that we're still handing out petitions. We're still having events to sign petitions. We've already started getting a lot of petitions turned back in. And with our small window of opportunity, people, we've got to push it out there, get the signatures, turn in the petitions so we can give you another petition to go and get signatures. So thank you, everyone. The LDs are doing great. LD 11 is rocking it, LD 9 and LD 10. So keep up the good work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy. And let me add that this week at Pima County Democratic Headquarters on Thursday and Saturday, there's going to be a petition signing event. I encourage you, all of you, to get down if you haven't signed all the signatures yet. It's going to be from 5 to 7 on Thursday and Saturday at Pima County Democratic Headquarters at Swan and First. And with that, let me get to our speaker, whom we're just absolutely delighted to have. As Arizona Attorney General from 2003 to 2011, Terry Goddard focused on consumer and civil rights. Today, Terry is fighting to get the Stop Dark Money initiative on the ballot and approved by Arizona voters in 2022. It will require the disclosure of major contributions to political campaigns. Terry believes that secret dark money in our politics is a dangerous threat to democracy. Terry needs our help to stop powerful people and corporations from secretly controlling our elections. The rules that apply to all the rest of us don't apply to dark money power brokers. Now, this is the third try on Stop Dark Money. In 2018, the Arizona Supreme Court threw out the initiative. In 2020, the Dark Money Initiative was on track until COVID-19 made it impossible to collect signatures. And now, Stop Dark Money, the initiative, is back again. And it needs roughly 238,000 signatures to get on the ballot. And with that, Terry, the floor is yours. Tell us about the initiative.
Thank you so much, Larry. And thanks to DGT for letting me spend a few minutes with you today, because this will be the third time, you mentioned, Larry, it's the third time we've tried to get this Stop Dark Money program going. It used to be called Outlaw Dirty Money. I still think that's a particularly good phrase, and I'll get in a minute why we changed it. They both work. So many of the folks on this call and in DGT generally have been helpful to us in the past. So thank you for that. Many of you are very, very aware of the details of what we're trying to do here. There are a few things that are new, and obviously this is an important season right now for signatures. We have quite a lot of activity, some very, very worthy efforts, and we don't want to overwhelm people with things to sign. But please, as you're signing all of the referenda, please remember we've got an important initiative too, and hopefully we can all march together under the same banner. Many of you I know have read the incredible book that came out, I believe, in about 5 years ago by a woman named Jane Mayer, who's an extraordinary investigative reporter. And she described it in 400 pages. I'll describe it just in 3 words. It's anonymous political spending. That's dark money. That's what we're trying to stop in Arizona. And what are they? They pay for political ads. And the bottom line is you have no idea when you see the ad who it is that's trying to persuade you to vote one way or the other. I use the sort of made up name Citizens for Peanut Butter, but I think you all know some of the other names are, Americans for Prosperity is one of the most well-known. Its logo is on the screen. But the bottom line is you have no idea who the folks paying for the ad are actually coming from. You can't evaluate the message because you don't know who the real messenger is. And I think that's the most important thing I have to say. It's the reason that I believe that dark money is a major threat to our democracy. And basically, if you don't know who it is that's making the message, you can't cast a knowledgeable vote for one way or the other about that message. So let's get rid of it. Let's put it all out in the open and make clear who it is that's behind the political ads. Now, this is a message that may not resonate as well in Pima County as it does in Maricopa, because Arizona Public Service is definitely a household name and a servicer to about half of the Maricopa County users. But just bear with me for a moment in terms of what happened in 2014. That was I think, a disaster. Obviously, you all know that the Corporation Commission sets the utility rates in the state of Arizona. In 2014, we now know that APS spent $10.7 million to elect 2 members. As a friend of mine said, it wasn't an election, it was an auction. And during the election, they had the line, we can neither confirm nor deny that we're playing a role in this election. And they used dark money surrogates to pour that money into media. Those surrogates were, again, the no-name operations that you've all heard about. One of them was called the Free Enterprise Club. It's still in action in Arizona. And who's not for free enterprise? Or I guess most of us are. Americans for Prosperity, who's not for prosperity, but the motivation is not told you by the name. Our columnist here at the Republic, Ed Montini, called it the reason that we are the Batcave of American politics, a phrase that has sort of stuck with me ever since 2014. But what happened, I sort of missed the part that, oh, those two people that got elected with the $10.7 million turned around and voted for a utility rate increase, actually against the advice of commission staff, of $95 million a year. So Arizona Public Service, ever since, I believe it was 2016 that was approved, have meant almost $100 million to the good out of our pockets as ratepayers. So that's the kind of thing that needs to be stopped, in my opinion. Now, direct democracy is really an issue here as well. And you know about, and you'll hear more about the referenda and the initiatives that are going to be hopefully on the ballot in the 2022 election. But there are two things I'd like to say about this. The first, as I believe you already know, is how important initiatives, referendums, and recall were to our founders. In 2012, the state constitution had all three. And as you probably know, President Taft vetoed the original Constitution because it had recall of judges. He thought that was inappropriate. He didn't let Arizona become a state as long as that was in the Constitution. This legislature dutifully took it out. Taft signed the statehood, so we became the 48th state. And then within the same year, Arizona put it right back in. So I think that shows more than anything else, not just how stubborn and ornery we are, but how important these direct democracy items were to the founding fathers of this state, and mothers, excuse me. But the legislature hates it. They basically feel that citizens are just too ignorant to be involved in direct legislation. And so they've done everything in their power to make it hard for folks to get on the ballot directly. And I just list a few of them here that are differences between what should be the same, in my opinion. You have petitions to get to nominate, to get candidates on the ballot, and you have petitions to directly legislate. But the direct legislation and the referenda require notarization, require copies of the text. And in the case of referendums, in some cases, that means you've got a book attached to the petition that's very unwieldy. They have a rule that says that you can only count the signatures from one county on a given petition, so that if you mix them up among the 15 signatures, the ones in the minority won't get counted. That's ridiculous. No electronic signatures. I think we all know how stupid that is. The exact dimensions of the paper are set up in a way that you can't Xerox a petition for wide distribution. And strict enforcement. Who in the world knows what that means? But that's one of the things that they apply to our referenda and initiatives. Here are the basic rules. I'm sure you're familiar with them. 5% of the last vote for governor for a referenda, 10% for a legislative initiative, 15% for constitutional. So what happened to outlaw dirty money? Wait a minute. Okay. Larry's already gone through the basic details, and I'm having trouble with my PowerPoint, but I'll try one more time. There it is. 2018, I believe the Supreme Court misread our proposition, and we said we were 2,000 signatures short. That was a heartbreaker. In 2020, COVID, we were on track. We had 300,000 signatures in the bank in March, and then COVID hit. And many of our volunteers, frankly, were in a highly susceptible population group. And I felt, and it was agreed to by our top volunteers, that we had to stop. And we did very reluctantly. So we're back again in 2022 with a few differences. I'll go through those in a second. Petitions are due. I think Larry mentioned the number. It's 228,000 signatures, approximately valid ones, have to be filed by July the 7th. They just changed that date on me. It used to be the 8th. So things are still moving targets. Now let me go to a couple of differences. and I'm sure there's some question about that. The first and perhaps most important is that at this time we're trying legislative, not constitutional. And that means 120,000 fewer signatures. There are a few other technical reasons, but in Arizona, as you know, we have a provision for initiatives that provides voter protection. If it's passed by the voters, the legislature needs 3/4 vote to change it. And that's pretty good protection from legislative meddling. So we felt it was the trade-off was important, that we want to get on the ballot in 2022. I don't want to mess around at all. And so 120,000 fewer signatures sounded pretty good to me. The next one is we have a different name, and we thought that eliminated some confusion. A lot of people said, including some folks that were very knowledgeable about political funding, well, we know what dark money is, but what's dirty money? And I had to explain, and as many of you have had to do, it's the same thing. We just think dirty money is more descriptive. Well, we're going for the one that is more widely known, and that's dark money. It also clears up some confusion that people might have if they signed the last petition. They'll know that this is a different one. Okay, the old name still works. If you go to Google and ask for outlaw dirty money, you'll get the same website. And I think that's important. There are a few changes on the triggers. It's now $50,000 for a statewide, $25,000 for a local election before you have to do the full disclosure required by this legislation. But the difference between this and the one we had before is that the provision, the trigger applies to all campaigns. As you probably know, the advocacy nonprofits, the 501c4s, are usually not content to just play in one sandbox. They get into many of them. And so instead of looking at it as campaign by campaign, we now look at it in the election cycle for all the different inclusions. So that's why the trigger is higher. Now, this is also a change, and I think it's an important change. We have some new decisions by the United States Supreme Court. Donors can opt out if they will be told that their money might be used or could be used for political media spending, and they have the option of saying, no, don't use my money for that. I think that will be a big help for the big nonprofits, Planned Parenthood, Sierra Club, some of the others that frankly have many different purposes that they put some of their donor money to. And some folks might be uncomfortable potentially being disclosed. And so they can say, no, don't do it to me. And then there's a new website. I invite you to go to it. It's stopdarkmoney.com. It's very simple, straightforward, and I think makes the case very well. Our next item is what's the same? If I can get to it. Yes, what's the same? And I think the most important is that it requires all contributions over $5,000 in one. So 5,000 is still considered a small contribution. 5,001 requires full disclosure of the original source of the money. We're going after the big donors. We frankly don't want to have a lot of paperwork for smaller contributions, and we think this allows us to do it. This is exactly what was in the previous outlaw dirty money proposition. And I think it affirms the most important thing, and all right, I'm sorry that I'm still PowerPoint deficient. But I think the most important thing is this affirms Arizonans have the right to know the original source of all money spent to influence their votes. That was absolutely fundamental to all three efforts that we've made. And hopefully that right to know is the thing that we're going to be able to put into law in the state of Arizona. And the Citizens Clean Elections Committee is still absolutely fundamental. They're the ones who will write the rules if this is passed by the voters, and they will the ones that will enforce those rules. Now, there's a lot going on, and I don't have there was mention of Invest in Arizona. Perhaps Lucy can get me their logo because they have 3 referenda coming forward. This Arizona Deserves Better, which I did have their logo, so I'm putting it on the screen. They have 3 referenda. And I can't say often enough how important these 6 referenda are. 3 of them helped to undo the damage that was done by the legislature to try to stop the will of the voters on Prop 208. And 3 others, the ones that I have up on the screen, are, I think, just really serious attacks on our free elections system. Now, they had to pick 3. There were several others that frankly could have been in this particular group, but I think those 3 are ones that we as voters in Arizona need to get on the ballot and need to let the voters be heard as to whether or not they should go in place. I don't think they will be successful if that happens. And I keep, sorry, I'm still having trouble with this. I'd like to close on the information that although we have very important support from Democrats, what happened to my screen? I'm sorry. This is a nonpartisan initiative. Oh, I see it stopped. Well, let me just close if you can still hear me. Larry, am I still on?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
And somehow I lost my great graphic. But my last one was a quote from a justice that as a lawyer, I think I've never had a chance to quote before. And that's Justice Antonin Scalia. And he said in a memorable decision back in 2010, that he felt that he would never want to be part of a Supreme Court who, because of their action, made it possible to campaign anonymously. He said that does not resemble the home of the brave. So I've had, late in my career, I've had the chance to quote Justice Scalia and also Justice Kennedy, who in a otherwise, I think, terrible decision, Citizens United, affirmed the fact that even though more money was going to be spent from corporate America, the right of the citizens to know where the money came from was going to be paramount. And a few years later, Justice Kennedy said he decried the fact that in America, the right to know was so anemic that so many states did not, in fact, allow their citizens to know who was behind these ads. And just to give a little shout to our home state, Arizona is probably the worst in this area. They are number 1 for allowing people to hide their contributions. Because in Arizona, the law only requires, if you're a 501c4, if you're an advocacy nonprofit and you want to spend money to influence an election, you just spend it. You don't have to have a local committee. You don't have to disclose anything other than what is necessary to disclose at the minimum for having spent the money. But you don't have to say where it's coming from at all. And I think that's wrong. I'd be happy if there are questions to go into some of our mechanisms for how do we find the original source, because that's the most important thing that this statute will do if it's enacted by the voters. I really appreciate the help getting signatures that DGT members have already provided. We've got almost a year ahead of us. You need to work on these referenda. I recognize that, but hopefully you'll keep a Stop Dark Money petition with you at all times and get the signatures that we need by next July. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Terry. I want to encourage everybody to ask questions. As Mike Bryan has outlined in the chat, you can ask a question in the chat and I'll count on Mike to ask them as they come up. You can also ask a question live by clicking on the reactions button and clicking on raise hand. I don't see any questions at the moment. So Terry, let me ask you this. In 2018, 3 dark money groups filed suit and against the dark money initiative, and it was successful. They knocked it off the ballot. And I'm wondering what sort of opposition you anticipate from these corporations and wealthy people who don't want to be exposed.
Larry, thank you for that question. I anticipate a lot. They spent millions of dollars going after us in 2018. They literally sent every petition signature overseas, I believe to Hong Kong, but I'm not positive of the destination. But they have back office legal operations that are overseas that they were able to pay them to basically check every single signature to see if it was registered. I have no idea how much that cost. They never had to disclose it, but I know that it was a huge number. So that's how seriously they took our first effort. I'd be happy to go into the legal reason that they found to be able to disqualify something like 10,000 of our signatures, which is the reason that we ultimately were not able to be on the ballot. But I won't bore you with that at this moment. It still makes me mad, though, many years later. We think we're much better equipped. We spent a lot of time in the drafting of this particular initiative, trying to figure out what the legal attacks would be. You never can get them all, but I think we, using some national assistance from the Campaign Legal Center in Washington, I think we did a pretty good job of protecting ourselves. You'll notice if you look at the initiative that we do very careful definitions of all the major terms, because we've learned from the Prop 208 situation that the legislature does not hesitate to try to undo a piece of citizen legislation by changing the definitions that are referred to in that legislation. So we wanted to make sure that wouldn't happen. We have protected ourselves against the service of process challenge to out-of-state circulators. That was the other reason that we went down in 2018. So Americans for Prosperity was the main attacker in 2018. I expect them to be again. They have unlimited funds and I expect them to spend it, but I think we're ready.
Paul Stapleton Smith asks about the enforcement of the proposed Stop Dark Money initiative. He says, what makes enforcement of this measure effective and how do we fund that enforcement?
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Paul. That's a good question. The enforcement is basically in the hands of the Citizens Clean Elections Commission. And we did that advisedly. We thought they'd done a commendable job as a bipartisan enforcer of clean elections and wanted to give them a little more to do so that they stay around. But we also didn't want to set up a whole new bureaucracy. We knew we'd be criticized if we tried to do that. And we thought we had a good operation already in place. So that was the reason behind that decision. Essentially, the way this works is the person who spends the money, the organization, the 501c4 in 99% of the cases, spends the money on political media. It doesn't cover everything. It just covers advertising, but it's in whatever format. So it could be Facebook, it could be Twitter, it could be television advertising. All of them would be covered by this proposition. As soon as they hit the 50,000 for statewide or the 25 for local, they have 5 days to say who the original source of all of their contributions that are over $5,001 are, or over $5,000 are. I don't have to be too technical there. And by original source, we mean the person or corporation that earned the money, not some no-name intermediary that's there to just hide the ball. We want to know if it was from Arizona Public Service, we want their name to be in the disclosure. And so sometimes that requires some careful follow-up. But the bottom line is if the person who spends the money cannot give you the name of the original source, they should not be spending that money. And so there is a penalty. The penalty is up to 3 times the amount of money that is either improperly disclosed or not disclosed at all. And there is a citizen enforcement as well as Citizens Clean Elections. In other words, citizens can also check the records. And if they think something smells fishy, they can apply to the commission to say, hey, you ought to look into this. If the commission doesn't, then they can give a right to sue letter to the citizens. So we think we've covered all the bases in terms of enforcement.
We also have a question from our board member, Susie Anderson. Go ahead, Susie.
Hi, thank you, Terry, for coming here and talking about this because it's one dear to my heart. And I started working on your outlaw dirty money way back in the beginning. Is the Clean Elections Commission in any danger from the legislature for the good work that they do? Can our legislature, those dirty players up there, do anything to disband, dismantle, throw a monkey wrench into their work?
Oh boy, thanks for that question. And I'm always worried, as I think Will Rogers said, that no one's property is safe as long as the legislature's in session. And that goes for our constitutional rights in Arizona. I don't think so, but you always need to be prepared. The Citizens Clean Elections proposition came in through a legislative initiative. So it is voter protected. They still have tried to find ways to undo it. And there have been a number of efforts in successive legislative sessions. It is probably not the main reason to support Stop Dark Money, but one of the things that we would do is not only give an additional job to the Citizens Clean Elections Commission, but we would also give them another reason for existence that was be voter protected. So if there was some way to undo their administration of the clean elections process, they would still have this as a responsibility that could not be taken away from them. So I sort of think that one of the things we're doing is making the Clean Elections Commission even more significant in Arizona politics.
We have a question from Shirley Muni. Go right ahead, Shirley.
Is there any prayer of getting that many signatures by September?
But for the first time, maybe in my lifetime, I can't blame the legislature for the 90-day deadline. That's in the Arizona Constitution. And the idea is referenda has a smaller number of signatures, 5%, 119,000 signatures, than initiative. But it's a very short timeline. And I don't exaggerate for a minute. That is pedal to the metal from day one to the end of the due date in mid or late September, which is 90 days after the legislature went sine die. And let me be very clear. I want everybody who's motivated on these 6 referenda to focus on those. Just keep the Stop Dark Money petition with you at all times. If somebody has the motivation to sign 6, I think they'll sign 7. And we are fundamental. In other words, that crazy stuff, in my humble opinion, would never have happened. The legislature never would have dared to do it if they hadn't have been so subservient to the dark money interests. So I just say that, you know, you've got 6 symptoms that are very important, and you have one fundamental cause, that's the getting rid of the dark money, which I think would make it safer for all of us in future legislative sessions.
And there's only one actual initiative, and that's the dark money.
At this moment, there may be others in the future, but there's 6 referenda and there's 1 initiative.
Okay.
And so they have different deadlines.
And you pretty much answered the question, Terry. The deadline for the referendum, which is the voter suppression ones that we're working on along with the education ones, are due by September 28th. They must be filed. So we are going to start calling them in the middle of September because we want to make sure we do get them filed by September 28th. And remember that ours are statewide as well. We were able to do this before in 2018, when this happened with the Red Fred movement. We were able to do this with the no on 305, the voucher expansion bill. We were able to do that within 90 days. That's why we do think that these are doable. And we just have to get people to sign the petitions as soon as possible so we can start counting to see where we are. We are going to have paid circulators. So
all right.
I think that helps.
But it's really hard because a lot of groups are not meeting in person to have the opportunity to sign them.
That's why that's why I'm always pushing it. That's why we're doing the best we can.
Are those petitions at Dem headquarters too?
Yes, the
Good.
Dems have been doing a good job of having all 7. And so when you go there, you can sign all 7. We have all 7 at TEA as well. It's just a matter of putting it out to folks and having all your family and friends sign and send to us or send to the Dems, and just work hard for the next 2 months.
Okay.
Man, it is truly a sprint, and the education forces, and I know again I'm talking to the choir here, did an amazing job on vouchers. They proved that a citizens group, actually with no paid circulators could do it. And that is something you asked, is it possible, Shirley? And I think that is an enduring statement that it is possible. It's hard, but it's possible. And I just think we need to exercise a new, one of the things Red for Ed did and Invest in Ed in the last go round was they tried some new techniques. And the permanent signing location is one of them. And we're trying to do that with Stop Dark Money. I think we're going to see some places that will always be open for people to sign. That's one of the deficiencies, I think, in the past. We depended on big events to be able to get a lot of the volunteer pass signatures. And big events probably are not going to happen between now and the deadline. I hope we get back to being in person. I would love to see you all personally rather than the little figures on the screen, but you can't sign digitally. And that we need to change that too, but that's for a different day. And so having a regular location that we can advertise on the web saying, if you're downtown, come to X, Y, and Z location, you can be sure of having a petition there. In Maricopa County, we have two bookstores, the Changing Hands Bookstore, who have offered to allow us to do that. That's a start. Hopefully we'll have more in Pima County soon so that people will always know where they can go.
This is from the chat from Andrea Kennedy. She asks, what's to stop an organization from getting many donations under $5,001 so that they don't have to report?
Thank you for that. We spent a lot of time worried about that possibility. And let me just be clear. There is no disclosure system that certainly that I have been able to study that doesn't have a few holes in it. Now, we tried to make those holes as small as possible. And in this case, basically there's a paragraph deep in the weeds in this legislation that says not only does the person who spends the money have to disclose original sources, but the last person to contribute to that institution has to disclose as well, up to any contribution that they receive of $2,500 or more. So I feel that our net, if you will, is good to $2,500. We felt that if you had to put together $1 million and $2,500 in smaller than $2,500 contribution, you would be going to great effort. And we've got a catch-all. It's my days as Attorney General. I spent a lot of time prosecuting criminal money laundering. And so there's a very good money laundering statute in Arizona, which basically says that it is a felony to disguise the source of your funds. Well, we didn't want to make it a felony because I don't believe we should criminalize political activity. But it is in this legislation. There is a statement there that says, if we catch you trying to secretly conspire, in other words, you're trying to bring in, let's say, 100 contributions under the threshold, but they all come from a single source. That source is what has to be disclosed. And if you try to avoid it by structuring, which is the legal term for what I described, that is a violation of the statute too. So we're not saying that the penalty would be instantaneous. I can't say that. You have a disclosure period and then you have an investigation period if somebody's trying to avoid your requirements. But I am saying that it's much sooner than the 5 years that it took for APS's $10 million to be disclosed to the corporation. We'll be able to know. And we have a couple of time limits in this, which I think are going to be very important for enforcement. One is 5 days. The first time you have to trigger a contribution disclosure is 5 days after you hit the threshold. Each time after that you hit either 25,000 for state or I believe it's 15,000 for local, you have to disclose again within 3 days. So it's a tight framework that you have to disclose in. And we believe that does as good a job as any statute that I've seen around the country. And I think I've looked at all of them. of being vigilant and being able to get to the original contributor and penalizing anybody that's trying to sneak by.
But D. Maitland has a question. Go ahead and with your question, D.
Okay. In continuing what you're just telling us, one of the ways that they do it when there is to have all their employees contribute. Is there some easy way we can find that out? Because, one of the big scandals was they actually paid back all their employees who gave all the donations. So did you think of that? And is there a way we can tell when it's employees giving a lot of money?
Well, we thought about that two ways. One, similar to the contribution requirements that exist right now in Arizona, we want the name, your address, and your employer, or retired if you're retired. So we start with that. So we could search the database for similar employers, and that would certainly give us a clue if somebody was trying to sneak by. Also, there are some fraud provisions in Arizona law, which I think would come to play if somebody if they disclose the employee and not the employer as the contributor, because we're very clear in our definition that it has to be the original source of the funds. And if somebody's getting recompensated, they're an intermediary, they're not an original source.
I wanted to ask you, Terry, what is your response to the dark money interests who say that you're violating the privacy of donors by requiring them to identify themselves?
Well, after I stop laughing, I do take that question seriously. It is one of the main ones that Americans for Prosperity have tried to use. The privacy of a $5,000 contributor, I can understand some concern for a $25, $50, $100 contributor who may work for a company that doesn't have the same point of view. But I believe very strongly that if you're given $5,000, you can take care of yourself. Now, maybe there's a difference of opinion about that, but we first thought that our best defense against that particular charge is that we're really focused in this legislation against large contributors. We're focused on large contributors. Nobody under 5,000, and that's cumulative over the 2 years of an election cycle, is going to have to disclose or be disclosed. And everybody who gets disclosed is knowing. In other words, I think the other important thing that's in this that wasn't in the prior proposition was the statement that everybody gets the chance, if they're a contributor, let's say you, Larry, give $10,000 to a 501c4. They will either in the solicitation or in a subsequent communication tell you that your name might be disclosed publicly and you have the option to opt out. And so at that point, you can make a decision. I don't want my name used, or it's okay. So I think that helps to protect any privacy right that might be lingering out there. And the last one, which we hear again, just to anticipate opponents, is that people are being harassed, that they might be subject to dangerous activities. This is based on a very legitimate stream of cases coming out of the South in the 50s, led by the NAACP, where the NAACP petitioned the court not to disclose their contributors because they thought they might be in physical danger. Well, the court bought that, and there's a couple of cases that say that, okay, that is a reason not to do public disclosure. Well, as Justice Kennedy said in Citizens United, there wasn't any proof offered that anybody was put in danger. But we have a safety valve in the proposition about that too. We say if you feel you or your family are going to suffer physical harm because of disclosure, you can ask the commission for an exemption. And I think that basically puts the lie to anybody who says that this is going to cause harassment or it's going to cause serious problems for people. A, there's no evidence that that's ever happened. But B, if it would happen, we've got an antidote.
Okay, we have a couple of live questions. Susie Anderson, go ahead.
Hello again. This time it's about how many other states have dark or dirty money initiatives or laws that protect their citizens. I'm focused on Arizona. I was not aware that there are some forward looking states out there that you know about.
There are some good ones, but let me be a little modesty here. If we pass this initiative, we would go from last to first in terms of disclosure. I believe it's the most far-reaching of the state efforts. And right now, Arizona is in last place because we are the most permissive, most liberal, if you will, about dark money contributors. I think that's one place where liberality is misplaced. So let's get it fixed. I would be wrong not to mention HR 1. The legislation for voting rights that is before the Congress today, and we hope earnestly will be passed, has very similar disclosure propositions to Stop Dark Money. And that's not coincidental. The same group that we relied on to do our latest drafting, the Campaign Legal Center in Washington, a nonpartisan group, helped to draft HR 1. So we're coming from the same source, and we do very much the same thing. HR 1, if it's passed, would apply only to federal candidates. Stop Dark Money only applies to state candidates. They don't overlap, but they are very similar.
We have a question from Andrea Kennedy. Go right ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you. Well, two things. I just wanted to express my admiration for Terry for persevering in this, and I'm just very grateful to you for doing it. The thing that occurred to me as I was sitting here is you were talking about signatures going overseas to be checked, and I wondered if that could be made an issue of and a law passed against it. Then it occurred to me it might discourage people from signing. So I don't know what you think about that, but frankly, I don't want my signature and address going over to Hong Kong or Bangalore or wherever it goes. The other thing is I wondered is, especially in light of Katie Hobbs being such a star on MSNBC, perhaps some attention, could we get some attention to these petitions on cable? Because we can't meet in big groups, but I think a lot of people in Arizona watch the cable news.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that's the overseas is not something that we can curb, because once you've signed a petition and it's submitted to the Secretary of State, it is a public document. So that is a disclosure of a kind, and I don't see any way around it. But it is disturbing that they are basically going to such lengths to try to invalidate our signatures. Now, they have a legal right to do it. Let me be very clear. But frankly, they have taken those legal rights to extremes, but they don't want anybody else to have legal rights, which I think is one of the great ironies of this particular battle. I'm looking for any way we can possibly raise the awareness of citizens. One of the advantages of having done this 3 times is we find a lot more people on the street know what dark money is and are willing to sign. The popularity is something that I find it somewhat surprising, because if you take our 100-word statement, which comes off of the petition, as has been done recently by a pollster, and you ask any voter on the street in a poll whether that's something they think ought to be passed in the state of Arizona. That was done about 2 months ago, and the response was 92% positive. And you've got to scratch your head and say, well, what's the legislature for anyway? If it's not to enact, I mean, if it's a close call, you could see that it might be something that the legislature might have concerns about, and they might debate it legitimately. But 92% is as close to unanimous as you get in our democracy. And it would seem to me that one of the tragedies here is that we as citizens have to try 3 times to get on the ballot with something that has 92% approval. And I can back that up with a vote in Tempe, which was 92% in favor of a similar proposition based on exactly what we have here. And Phoenix is a little sluggish. So they passed it by only 85%. But those are amazing numbers. And so I take some consolation in the fact that when people get these petitions and you say, don't you think you ought to know the original source of the money that's spent trying to influence your vote? The overwhelming response is, hell yes, where do I sign? But you're right, we need to get a better awareness among folks, and cable's a good opportunity. Now, we don't have advertising money, but perhaps Lucy, with her vast resources, can find some ways to get, and I say that tongue in cheek, please, Lucy. But I think with so many interests converging here to try to get signatures, some kind of joint effort to get the citizens more aware of what's happening would be well spent. So thank you for that question.
All right, Terry, by the way, there we go. Your video is down, but now it's back.
Sorry.
Mike Bryan, I understand there's a question in the chat.
No, actually, this one is mine.
Okay.
Terry, we've been seeing in recent years the courts kind of hacking away on their decisions at the rights of Arizona citizens to do petitions, referendas, and initiatives by narrowing and focusing in on the requirements for the petitions to have a proper summary, the legislature passing laws to make it so that you have to do strict compliance with the law, all these things. And we've seen a packing of the courts in this last two terms by Ducey. I was wondering if you want to talk generally about how we might address that increasing attack by the courts and by forces of reaction to try and narrow and limit the ability of Arizonans to legislate.
That's a great question, and I see that it's 12:57. So in 3 minutes, I don't know that I can get an answer. But let me just say first that I'm an officer of the court, and one of my obligations is to follow precedent and to follow the rulings of the court. That's as a lawyer. I'm such an officer. I take an oath. But I've been very disappointed by this Supreme Court. I think packing, you used that word, and it's frankly accurate. We used to be very proud in Arizona that we have one of the best state Supreme Courts in the nation under Justice Feldman. We can't say anything close to that today. And that's sad. The decision that was made to outlaw or to disqualify us in 2018 was based on completely wrong reading of the record. They presume facts that were frankly not in evidence, and I'm very sad about that because I want to be supportive of this court. I think our best defense is to change the legislature. Nobody in this audience, I think, has any doubt about that. But with only a 1-vote majority, this legislature has been on a relentless quest to curb citizens' rights to the ballot. And, I listed a few of the differences between candidate petitions and legislative initiatives and referenda. I think they should be exactly the same. Maybe we should propose a popular initiative that would make them the same, because a signature on either one is important. The signatures should be beyond reproach, whether they're for legislation or to put somebody on the ballot. And I, for one, do not understand and cannot support the double standard that we use for signatures in the state of Arizona. And the only explanation is that our legislature hates citizen initiation. They don't want to see it, and they want to do everything in their power to keep it from happening. And they've done a marvelous job of that. So those extra backflips that we have to go through in order to get on the ballot are legislatively imposed, not court imposed. The court has played a role, but I think it's mostly legislation. So I don't think I need to encourage anybody on this call to be very concerned about who their legislatures are in the next session. But that I think is critical. And if we can change the majority, that would make a big difference in terms of voter rights, in my opinion.
Thank you, Terry. I think we're very lucky to have your sagacity, experience, and expertise for the state of Arizona. And I was wondering, just as a follow-up question, is there any chance we can tempt you back into running for office again?
You have to talk to my wife, and I would say the chances are pretty nil. They've suffered with my being in office and running for office, and That's more than any mortal should have to contend with. But I'm delighted if I can play some role in this initiative and in supporting good candidates to be behind the scenes pushing instead of out front shooting the baskets. And I think we all need to try to do both. And I've been privileged to have the chance to. I'm proud of what we did, but now I want other people to step forward. And we've had some good ones just recently, and hopefully we can keep that going. Let me start with the United States Senate. We've got a great senator we need to reelect in 2022, and I know that's on everybody's agenda. But the support role is really important, and I want to commend DGT for being such incredible supporters, not just in Pima County, but statewide, to people of quality being in elected office. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Terry, we're out of time, and I wondered if you could close out our meeting by telling us what are some effective ways that we can promote the initiative, where can we find out more about it, and how can we support you?
Oh boy, thank you. Well, the website is stopdarkmoney.com. That has some of the information that you're referring to. We're trying to get petitions in everybody's hands. So if you don't have one, please get one. They're at Democratic headquarters. I know Lucy has some. I think there's several people on this call that are acting as our ambassadors, a word that we stole from the Red for Ed movement. And we take it very seriously. Those ambassadors are critical to making sure that we have the petitions in the hands of folks who, starting with, in this COVID environment, starting with friends, family, immediate associates, we're not asking anybody to put themselves in danger. But we do think that we can be very effective as individual citizens, just having the petition in the car or in your purse or in your back pocket, I guess, if it'll wad up and fit there, so that when the occasion presents, and it does often, I know, in the course of our lives, just ask the person you're dealing with to sign. The one downsaw that we've had to deal with is that has to be in person. And that we think one of the important legislative moves that we can do in the future is to have electronic signatures, but we don't have it yet. And so make it a habit to have a petition somewhere handy, so that we slowly and incrementally will get the signatures we need. Now, that doesn't apply to Lucy's signature gathering. That has to be immediate and urgent. So I want to make it clear that there are two agendas here, and hopefully they can work together. And thanks so much for the chance to talk with everybody today.
All right, Terry, thank you so much for making time available to tell us about the Stop Dark Money initiative. We wish you all the best. Appreciate you spending some time with us. Look forward to seeing all of you next time. And with that, I'm going to end the meeting. Thanks very much for coming, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.